everybody, and welcome to Halloween. I know it's still early in the month of October, but this is not just any October. This is Carpentober. Yeah, it's another name that I came up with. I'll talk about that later. This is the spooky follow-up to June Hughes as a monthly event. And if you hadn't guessed by the name, I'm going to be doing horror movies by the great John Carpenter. It's one of my favorites, but there is a catch. I will only be talking about Carpenter movies that I've loved all my life, and they have to be horror. So sadly, I cannot talk about Big Trouble in Little China. And if you know me, you know I would love to talk about Big Trouble in Little China all day long. So that is the caveat. I am really excited for the series. I am a huge John Carpenter fan. Not only his movies, but his music as well. He's just one of those visionary artists that if others can't do it, he's going to show you that he can do it any way he can. In fact, that's how he got into the whole thing of him doing all of his movie scores by himself. He needed music. He ran out of money for the budget, so he's like, I'll do it. And the rest is movie history. It is now 1980, and we have moved on to Antonio Bay, California. And if you haven't figured it out, and if you just skipped the intro and didn't look at the thumbnail, this is The Fog. Ooh. Released in 1980 and starring Adrienne Barbeau. That's the numbers right here. Adrienne Barbeau, Tom Atkins, Janet Leigh, and Jamie Lee Curtis. The Fog is Carpenter's take on an EC Comics style ghost story. Now, if you don't know, EC Comics were the home to horror anthology stories in the 1950s. They were comic books. They got a lot of bad press because they were evil, that sort of thing. But these titles include the famous Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear. These all told short, intelligent, and scary stories, all in comic form. The best way to even explain it is if you've seen an episode of Tales from the Crypt, or the Creepshow series, or the Creepshow movies, or the Tales from the Crypt movies, at least in the beginning of the Tales of the Crypt movies, you know the feel and style of The Fog. Now, the movie opens on veteran actor John Houseman as he's telling a ghost story around a campfire to kids.
11:55, almost midnight. Enough time for one more story. One more story before 12.
And in this story, he basically explains the entire backstory of the movie. The funny thing is, yeah, you're listening to it, but the atmosphere and the anticipation of what's to come next. Watching this again, I found myself tuning the story kind of out and just embracing I'm here with these kids listening to this ghost story that John Houseman of Ghost Story, which is another great movie that came later in the 80s, he's telling us. And just when I started to get back into the story and listen to the words, it was over and the movie was beginning. But I have to say that intro was so haunting and effective, and originally not in the movie. See, The Fog was too short when it originally finished. Its running time was 88 minutes, which was just 20 minutes over an hour. And the studio thought it needed to be just a little bit longer. So John Carpenter made some extra scenes, and this was one of them. It's one of those rare moments where when the studio buds in, well, they didn't really butt in. They were just like, it's just not long enough, it really wasn't long enough. But this is just one of the rare times where a studio note made the movie better. Congratulations, studio. You've done one good thing so far in the series. So the ghost story was basically this. In 1880, the 6 founders of Antonio Bay, California, deliberately sank a ship in a thick fog so that the ship's wealthy and leprosy-afflicted owner, who went by the name Blake, would establish a leper colony nearby. The 6 conspirators also used Blake's gold to fund the founding of the town. And on this day, on the 100th anniversary of Antonio Bay's founding, Blake and his men would walk the earth again, concealed in a fog, to seek revenge on the 6 founders that ruined him and killed him, and to get his gold back. Ooh. Chills. Adrienne Barbeau, in her film debut, plays a radio DJ atop a cliff next to the town lighthouse. So she has a full view of the bay that Antonio Bay is famously known for. Oh, man, that gave me the chuckles. Oh, I'm not cutting that out either. And she notices a strange fog coming in and tries to tell the local authorities about this weird glowing fog that no one seems to care about. Meanwhile, the night she sees that fog farther off into the distance, she can't see this. She doesn't have like all-seeing eyes. She's just a radio DJ with windows. Out of town, Jamie Lee Curtis is coming off her big Halloween performance, and her character is hitchhiking north and gets picked up by Tom Atkins driving into town.
Listen, I never hitchhiked before. Are you weird?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am weird.
You are weird.
Yes.
You're weird. Thank God you're weird. The last ride I had was so normal, it was disgusting.
And speaking of Tom Atkins, I love Tom Atkins. He's just a fantastic actor that just blew up in the 80s, especially horror in the 80s. I think it was only horror in the 80s. I consider him a member of the holy trinity of horror badasses. We have Bruce Campbell, Reggie Bannister, and Tom Thrill Me Atkins. He's a bit subdued in this one, as opposed to, say, like Night of the Creeps or Halloween 3. But he's still good old Tom. On the first night that the ghosts return, because it goes from midnight to midnight, I guess. I don't know what the rules are. But the rules, there is one rule, and it's a very polite rule for the ghosts. They knock. When they reach someone's house, they will knock. In fact, when Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis are done with their coital arrangement that just happened out of nowhere, the fog comes in and there is a knock at the door, and then another knock until Atkins gets up and checks. And then the doorbell rings. And then the fog goes away and they go away. But all of the ghosts knock. It's very polite of them. It's also very classic EC Tales from the Crypt type of horror scenario. The ghosts would knock in a Tales from the Crypt story, and I kind of like that. It's just a little thing that just like, okay, so we're used to things like busting in and all that kind of stuff, but no, these guys knock at first. There's a couple times where they bust through things, but they mostly knock if they're feeling classy. But this first night, as I go off and start talking about knocking, this first night the fog engulfs a fishing boat, and we get our first look at these ghosts. And I put ghosts in quotes because they're corporeal ghosts. They're not ethereal. Those are two big words that mean they are solid, but not ghostly. They are very solid, and they kill the small crew. I think it was 3 or 4. I think it was 3. Numbers have to make sense in this movie because they only need to kill 6. So I guess they're halfway there at this point. But the next day, Atkins and Curtis's characters, they discover this ransacked fishing vessel, and eventually they find a dead body that looks like it's been decaying underwater for months or years or just a long time. Not the day before, not the night before, but just a long ass time, and it doesn't make sense. There's a really cool scene in the morgue where the body comes alive for a little bit and then just falls flat over. There's a lot of unexplained supernatural things that go on, but it's an unexplained supernatural movie. And again, in the way of being an EC Tales from the Crypt style story, that kind of stuff can happen, and it doesn't have to make complete sense. And it works. It just works. At the same time, things start going crazy. Cars' horns start going off. An auto garage, the hydraulic lift starts going up. Radios go crazy. Chairs move. Clocks blow up like they burst from the inside out. Strange things are happening all over the town. Strange supernatural things. And as the movie goes on, little hints show up about the horrific, kind of horrific. They don't make it as horrific, but the tainted truth behind the founding of the town. And they find this stuff out as they're getting ready to celebrate their centennial. The local government discovers the truth about the town, basically being funded by the blood of Blake and his men. And in a very Jaws fashion, they decide to have the celebration anyway. But unlike Jaws, the mayor isn't aware of the danger and is just racked with embarrassing guilt from the founders. She's played by Janet Leigh. She's not like the evil mayor from Jaws, where, you know, people's lives came after the fact that we needed to have this celebration for the town. She's just like, oh, that really sucks. Do you think we should still celebrate our town? And they had the statue of the ship that in the skewed history of their town, or like it crashed and the gold washed up on shore, and that's how we founded our town. Yeah, it's not. I'm not comparing the movie to Jaws, although it does have a very Jaws feel. Mainly, probably because it's on a coastal town and there's boats and stuff, and people act the same way because it's the same town. And there's not a beach. It's just one of those cliffside towns. But you could play it like after or before watching Jaws, and it kind of fits in with that style. Just the way the soft lights hit on the shores and a lot of stuff. It just has a Jaws look to it, and some similarities story wise. As the movie starts wrapping up, we find out more and more about the reasoning of these supernatural events, and we find the final ancestor of the town, and the final confrontation takes place in the town's church. And I know I yada yada'd the majority of the movie, but I tried to stay vague and refrain from details because it is a damn good ghost story. And I feel like if I've spoiled too much, there'd be no reason to watch it. But it's also been 41 years, so if I can spoil it a little bit, I will, like I kind of have, but nothing detrimental to the movie itself. Knowing the background isn't going to spoil anything. It's just a damn good ghost story, and you don't see those very often. In fact, I don't think you really see one as good until Ghost Story, which I don't know was 1981 or 1982. I'm going off script here because I don't know. But like I said, it also has John Houseman in it, and it is also not, well, Ghost Story is not a scary movie. It's one of those just creepy ghost stories. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about The Fog. Like in my June Hughes event, I'm not going to go through the whole ask the big question because I already love these movies. In fact, like I mentioned before, this idea came to me as a spur of the moment thought. Not in the shower this time. I was actually talking with my other co-hosts on the Cinemadness podcast. There's only one podcast, the Cinemadness podcast. and we were talking about things to do in the future. And one of the things was what other months could I do? Oh yeah, I mentioned I wanted to do Philip K. Dicksember, and they didn't think that was a good idea to just do Dicksember. So I was like, what about Carpentober? And they just completely winced at that. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. So I naturally had to do it. So here we are. We we are in our first step, our Carpentober. The Fog is a unique movie. In fact, that is an apt description for probably all the films that I'll be discussing in this event. John Carpenter doesn't do traditional, and I think that's what draws me to enjoying his work. This is, as I mentioned before, his take on a ghost story. It's filled with creepy scenes, effective jump scares, and the red-eyed ghost sailors are, well, they're fucking scary. This is a classically scary picture, almost in the vein of like the 1930s Universal monster movies, but with a more modern take on things, with more slashing and stuff. But what I think really helps the movie is the look. Once again, Carpenter had a very small budget, and he shot it like it was a big picture, which gave it that creepy, gritty, down-to-earth feel. It was like looking at a story right out of Vault of Horror or any of the other EC comics. And that's a very good thing. Making it look small on the big screen gave it the feel of reality in a supernatural film, if that makes sense. Again, you have to watch it to really understand what I'm saying. You have to watch it to understand. I cannot tell you. The idea of a scary movie is far beyond what a human can say. You have to experience. Messing with you. Funny thing though, this movie was rated R, and there was not one drop of blood or gore or nudity or not even any harsh language. In fact, it's one of the biggest things people talk about when you mention The Fog. Why is it rated R? I can't even guess. Like, I guess terror? I mean, it's pretty creepy, and it draws you in, and it scares you. So maybe the MPAA of 1980 thought terror alone would not warrant a PG rating. Carpenter also had fun with character names in this movie, being only his third big picture. Really his second. Dark Star was not really a big movie. They just gave it a bigger release than it needed to be. It was more of a student film, but it's considered a motion motor picture. Major motion picture, but he wanted to throw some nods to his past, to the two pictures beforehand. For example, Atkins' character's name was Nick Castle. Nick Castle being the name of the actor who played the Shape in Halloween, which would be later named Michael Myers. There's also a character named Dan O'Bannon, who was a phenomenal screenwriter. He passed away a couple of years ago. It wasn't too long ago. But he wrote and created, well, at least he created Alien, Return of the Living Dead, Life Force. He wrote the screenplay for Total Recall, and as well as Dark Star, John Carpenter's first major motion picture, which eventually evolved into the movie Alien. Also, on the radio, in the beginning of the movie, when Atkins, I think it's when Atkins is driving alone. I think so. You hear the DJ talk about the band, the Coupe de Villes. The Coupe de Villes were a music group that Carpenter was in. They also did the theme song for Big Trouble in Little China. Haha, see, it did come up. I can't talk about John Carpenter without bringing that up. So that was 1980s The Fog. It is still creepy. It still draws you in, and it keeps you interested throughout the entire picture. Now, it's not full of crazy action or crazy kills or any of that stuff, but it's an effective classic ghost story. Definitely a movie you should put on your Halloween movie rotation. How do you feel about The Fog? Does it hold up? Does it fall flat? Have you even seen it? Do you like the remake better? Let me know in the comments. I want to know your opinion. And make sure you hit that subscribe button. In fact, right now would be a good time to do that. That way you won't miss when an episode of Carpentober premieres. But it also helps us grow as a channel. That's right. I said us. The Cinemadness podcast isn't just a movie podcast that you can listen to. We also have video reviews right here on this channel. Also, check out Say Anything with Allison, where she basically says anything. She comes up with an idea for a topic and she takes it and runs with it on a video. Of course, it's movie-based. If it wasn't movie-based, we'd fire her. Also, you can find us on pretty much every social media platform. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We even have a TikTok that we never use. Everything that you could think of, you can find it right here. So I want to give you a big thank you for joining me for The Fog, and happy Carpentober. I'll see you next week.